patterns as simple as they are creating complex systems, that even little actions and thoughts can grow into amazing things, sort of like compound interest of one's thoughts. February's theme is radical interconnection. We often emphasize the science in science of mind, but life itself is just as much an art as it is a science. With every breath we are creating, never in isolation, but in harmony with all living things, all living beings, past and present. Each moment we weave and are woven into a vast interconnected tapestry of existence. As conscious creators, we are called to actively shape and transform the world around us. Recommended book for February, Thich Nhat Hanh, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. Uncover the hidden stories within and imagine transforming how you connect with the world. Please help me welcome Audrey Beaudry with her inspiring talk, Ripples, the Art of Mindful Living.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm trying to imagine the warmth. Oh, we can do that. Not enough to get sunburned, but do it. You can put the first slide on. So when Martin Luther King Jr. marched down Chicago against the Vietnam War in March 25th, 1967, he did so under the banner of both English and Vietnamese sign that read, "Men are not our enemies. If we kill men, with whom shall we live?" His deep friendship with Thich Nhat Hanh, apparently Thay is the nickname, was built on a shared understanding our true enemies are not people, but the forces of anger, resentment, hatred, fear, and discrimination. It's interesting how in the first paragraph they have a Black activist for Black American Culture Month and the author of the book of the month for February. It's all connected. The path of not hating the enemy is profoundly a spiritual practice. Dr. King believed that we can replace hate with love if we have enough spirituality and ethics. They taught that what the world needs most is a God of compassion, non-discrimination, tolerance, and love. Love allows us to see hatred, anger, and discrimination not as enemies, but as energies within us that can be transformed. Science of Mind teaches that our thoughts create our reality. What we focus on becomes our lived experience. Psychology calls this biased attention. We selectively focus on information that confirms our views while ignoring data that challenges them. Just ask our Google algorithms. These biases influence how we see ourselves and others. While it can feel daunting to uncover these hidden beliefs, transformation is possible. As Ernest Holmes reminds us, we exist in limitless opportunities which are forever seeking expression through us. Talk to yourself, not to the world. There is no one to talk to but yourself, for all experiences take place within. So a common phrase in Center for Spiritual Living circles is creating a world that works for all. I think lots of us recognize this phrase. That was the theme for all of 2016. So, but what does that really mean? Who decides what works? And who do we include in the all? Humans are meaning-seeking creatures. We create stories to explain why the world is the way it is, to understand our place in it. These stories come from our culture, religion, family, education, and media. People in power shape which stories become dominant. What's that old saying? The victors of the war write the history. So, in preparation for this talk, I was thinking about what do I have bias about? And I Googled, how can Canadians benefit from Trump's thinking? Totally expecting the internet to crash. Or at very least, seeing this message. But no, Google came up with 5 things to think about. Canada as a trading nation could benefit from adopting more aggressive approaches in economic negotiations, ensuring better trade agreements and strengthening our economic sovereignty. If some of you know my family life and my history, we have very different American conversations at our dinner table. You can ask me why later. Number 2, Canadians who tend to be more cautious in business could benefit from embracing a more entrepreneurial mindset. And the thought is seeing failure as a stepping stone rather than a setback. I think that's kind of in our teachings, seeing failure as a stepping stone rather than a setback. Not necessarily the words we use, but the feeling. Number 3, while Canada has a strong sense of identity, there's an opportunity to build more self-reliance in key areas such as energy production, manufacturing, technology to reduce dependency on foreign imports. So the last 2 are about political disruption, which I'm not going to go into. But the key takeaways from Canadians the key takeaway for Canadians might not be to adopt Trump's approach wholesale, but to analyze where boldness, negotiation, and self-interest could be strategically beneficial. So part of our spiritual growth is critically examining these stories. Are they creating separation or unity? These stories are not true in the absolute sense. They are interpretations of reality. The goal is not to stop telling stories, but to become aware of them and question whether they still serve us. The first step in transformation is mindfulness. We must notice how we objectively stereotype others. This requires paying attention to our first thoughts, the initial unfiltered reactions as we have when we meet somebody, read an article, or encounter a new situation. Our first thoughts reveal our hidden biases. Once we recognize them, we can choose not to let them dictate our actions. This can be uncomfortable, but transformation demands that we sit in discomfort. I actually had an incident since I wrote this on Thursday. I was in my car on the radio, and I just spent the day before an hour with India help desk doing some IT stuff. And on Thursday, the radio goes on, and it's channel 100 point something, and it's an India person with an accent on the radio. And I was like, that really belongs in the help desk. That's not where I expected it. And it's like, that's my bias there. Like, I have family that talk with an accent. Why do I think that the radio needs to be all North American voices? So here's an example, and this is an Ontario example, but it certainly can apply to Manitoba. So Liam has always dreamed of working in Toronto. Growing up in a small mining town in northern Ontario, he was told, if you want to make something of yourself, you have to leave. Has anybody experienced that? I don't know how many have grown up in a small town. So he did. He worked hard and earned a scholarship and landed a marketing job in Toronto, but he never quite felt like he belonged. Whenever he mentioned his hometown, there was a pause. Wow, that's really far north. You must love the outdoors. Bet you never saw a skyscraper before moving here. It's always subtle, always said with a smile, but the message was clear. He was perceived as rough around the edges, someone who didn't quite belong in the corporate world. One day in a team meeting, his manager said, "We need someone who understands rural markets. You know since you're from up there." The room chuckled. Liam forced a smile. He had studied international branding, but his expertise was reduced to his origins. As he walked home, he passed a billboard that read, "Canada, where everyone belongs." When I Googled that phrase, this is the most Canadian looking one I came up with, we're using that phrase for hopefully a lot of things, but the two-spirit, gay, lesbian, bi group, I think I'm missing a letter on the end. Q. Okay. QA. We'll have to talk about what the A means now.
Ally.
Oh, allies. Okay. I'm in there now. Okay. Newcomers. And people that don't have enough food. So freeing ourselves from hidden biases is a lifelong practice. There is no finish line, but as we practice, we expand our capacity to love, compassion, and connection. Mindfulness teaches us to be present, to be here now. Every moment offers us a choice in how we engage with the world. Letting go of hidden biases requires moving beyond autopilot thinking. It must mean stepping outside of our social conditioning. Maya was a teacher of 20 years with 20 years experience. She prided herself on teaching her students fairly. That sounds like an extra, it's somebody's jacket. She prided herself in treating all her students fairly. She had attended diversity training workshops, read books on biases, and considered herself open-minded. One day, a new student, Jordan, joined her class. Jordan had rough edges. He spoke bluntly, sometimes interrupted, and didn't always make eye contact. Almost immediately, Maya found herself assuming he would be a troublemaker. She kept a close watch on him, expecting disruptions, and found herself subtly embracing whenever he raised his hand. Then, during a mindfulness training for educators, the facilitator said, "Who in your class do you expect to cause problems?" Do we have teachers in the group? Do you ever get that? We have teachers in the group. I don't know if we have any here today. What story are you telling yourself about them? Maya's heart sank. She realized she had put Jordan in a box without even meaning to. Her assumptions weren't based on anything he had done, just on how he carried himself, how he didn't fit her unconscious expectations of a good student. Determined to shift her perspective, Maya made a conscious effort to observe Jordan with fresh eyes. She noticed that he often helped classmates who struggled. He asked insightful questions. He wasn't disengaged, he just had a different way of processing information. By challenging her autopilot thinking, Maya saw Jordan for who he truly was, not for who she assumed he would be, and in doing so, she freed herself and him from a story that had never been true to begin with. I remember watching 60 Minutes years ago, probably 30 years ago, and it was a story about this company that went into classrooms to check for biases, gender biases. And they went into classrooms, and it was elementary school age, and they went into classrooms, both male and female teachers, and they told them, we're watching you for biases. So the teachers knew to be sort of on their best behavior, but they still found biases against girls. And the example they gave was, it was a younger grade, they were given a drawing exercise. So the teacher was going around while they were drawing, and the teacher would stop, often put the hand on the shoulder of a young boy, and ask insightful questions about the drawing, and engage the young boy with conversation about the drawing. But when they found often when they went to check on the girls, they just told the girls they were pretty. The drawing was pretty. Isn't that a nice color? And they knew they were being watched for biases, but maybe 30 years ago that wasn't considered, like, whether you engage with somebody or not, a bias or not. So, getting back to Thich Nhat Hanh, he writes, many of us get swept away by events and situations around us and by whatever we see and hear. We lose ourselves. This is why we must also cultivate freedom from the crowd. When you have real freedom, even if the crowd is shouting or going in one direction, you can still be yourself. As we reflect on today's talk, notice any resistance that arises. Resistance is an invitation to listen deeply to your inner self. Take some time to sit in stillness and ask yourself, where in my life do I allow my biases, prejudice, and preconceived notions prevent me from seeing others as they are? How do my hidden biases prevent me from treating others with loving kindness? Be willing to sit with what arises without judgment. If your first thought is, I've done my work, I have no biases, think again. We all carry beliefs, biases, and stories that shape how we see the world. Now, I haven't talked about Ernest Holmes too much this talk, I think once. And I love getting some Dr. Holmes in. With good-natured flexibility with yourself, learn to rise from confusion into peace, from sadness into joy. Turn to the light within. Believe in yourself. Listen deeply to divine nature, which forever imparts itself to you. Let us commit to this practice, knowing that as we transform within, we participate in the transformation of the world. And I'm going to do my usual closing with an affirmation. Repeat after me if you choose. If you don't, that's fine too. I am ever mindful.
I am ever mindful.
In the ways my life force.
In the ways my life force.
Ripples out into the world.
Ripples out into the world.
And so it is.
And so it is.